I can tell where this is going. I can tell. I've simply been around the block too long. I absolutely know where this is headed. I'm just afraid for what's going to happen to me. Because we already get blamed for a lot. And honestly, rightfully so. Right? But there is a lot of accusations about the Americanization of the game when it comes to football. And we are going there with this too. And I'm telling you, it's not even true. Right? It is not even true. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm also going to tell you why I like it. I got a lot of different thoughts about this particular thing. But what I can tell you for certain is that this is not the Americanization of the game. With stuff like halftime shows and whatever, FIFA is hiding behind, it's not us. It's the Americanization of the game. That's just, we're just doing it because or something like that. It feels like that at least. Nobody blames FIFA and they just kind of go at Americans actually taking an interest in the sport. But this is not one of those things. And the reason that, I don't want to spoil it. Luis Enrique, okay, he's the coach of PSG. Probably know that. If you don't, welcome to football, soccer. This is him, right? Newly shaved head, freshly broken collarbone after a bicycle accident. He's just vibing, hanging out. Except that's during a match. He watched the first half of PSG's most recent match from the stands, from the broadcast booth, from like the suite level. He watched the first half, then came down, gave a team talk, and coached the second half from the sideline. This is not something that really I've ever seen before. I mean, I've done videos about managers that got a touchline ban, right? They get a touchline ban, and then they go, there was that one guy in, I think Estonia, stood on top of the stadium, right? Like all sorts of moves that these guys make, right? Javier Mascherano gets ejected from the game and then sits in the front row and calls his assistant on the phone. I don't even remember if there was ever any punishment for that. But this is new. He wasn't forced to be up there. He just randomly decided that he was going to try it. It wasn't that random. Okay, obviously he got asked about it, and this is what he said. For a long time, I've seen rugby coaches analyze games from a different perspective, a very different perspective. I like the possibility of improving things this way. I wanted to watch the first half from the stand, and it's magnificent. It's different. I can control everything. Obviously, he's wearing a headset, which allows him to communicate with somebody down on the touchline in a way where he can still be an effective manager, because obviously the number one concern is unless you can set up a can in like a very long, uncut string all the way down to the bench, you're going to need a way to tell the players what you need them to do. And I think he's actually figured the whole thing out, because there is a very important part of being a manager, and that is what you can do when you are around the players down on the touchline. You can more effectively read body language. You can have more personal, more private conversations with the players. You can look into their eyes. Right? Management is the science of tactics, but it is also the alchemy of knowing who to use at the right moment, to sense who's having the big day, who's not up on confidence, right? To be able to see and sense all of those things. And Luis Enrique seemingly has found a hack for that. Because in the first half, that shit matters a lot less. You're not making any subs, and you're really just assessing what happens in the match itself. And then you go down and you give the team talk, and that's what he said was fantastic. It's an interesting option that I'm going to use in the future. After that, you can perfectly deliver the halftime talk because you've clearly seen who played well on the pitch. We have so much direct information, he explained after the match. You go down, you give the team talk, and then in the second half, when you're handling things like substitutions, things like, tactical adjustments, that are much more frequent, obviously, in the second half. After the first half, you get kind of a state of play of what's happening. You can then do those from the touchline. Look into the player's eyes. Make those decisions. He nailed it. I think he nailed it first try. Now, it is fascinating to me because you have to think about this from a manager's perspective. Luis Enrique. He's been an international coach before, so he's definitely watched plenty of matches from the stands when you're doing the scouting for that and stuff. But in terms of coaching a match, if you come up as a manager, it's just from field level. You just get used to reading what's happening and making decisions based off what you're seeing from field level. And it is very, very different to be watching your team play and assessing the performance of those players from the suite level. I would imagine, at least just from the perspective of the manager, there would be some sort of growing pain in that situation. But it doesn't sound like there was. And he said that he's going to do it again. He's basically said that he's going to do it again. He's not ruling out repeating this strategy in upcoming games. And I respect him for this, because he said something else. Like, it was something that I wanted to try. I'd seen maybe some other coaches do it. And if this is what you want your manager to be doing. I know, like, the reason I started this video the way I did is I know the first internal reaction from a lot of football hardos is going to be throw up in their mouth and hate this. But you want your manager to be trying this stuff. You want to be looking for every edge imaginable. That's what a coach is supposed to be doing. Finding any possible way to win. And Luis Enrique is doing that. He's willing to put himself in a weird position that he knows is going to be an article, a tweet. It's going to be a topic of conversation for idiots like me, right? He knows that. But he's going to do it anyways because he thinks it might give him a chance to win. He's going to go ahead and try it, right? In a match against Lawls. He's going to give it a shot. He gave it a shot. You know what? And it didn't end up, well, it didn't end up costing him anything. At least because I think PSG won. They won 2-0. And you know what? One of those goals was scored in the first half, and one of those goals was scored in the second half. So scientifically, I don't know what that tells us at all in terms of this experiment. Now, why is this not an Americanization? Because if you watch American football, you will see coaches upstairs with the headset on. That's never the head coach. In American football, the head coach, with very rare exceptions, including one remarkable one where a coach was recovering from surgery and they had him take his hospital bed to the suite level so he could coach the game from there in the hospital bed with a headset on. Shout out to Hugh Freeze, also a guy that got fired from a previous job for something involving a stripper. So genuinely fascinating guy. Normally the head coach, barring surgery and strippers, is on the sideline. Okay. And the assistants are up there. This, I've long been surprised, was not more of a thing in football. Now, obviously, the big clubs have their analysts kind of filming up there for later. And they're beaming stuff down to their assistant coaches. But one thing that American sports does do well, particularly American football, which is the only of the 4 American sports that is exclusively played on a big grass field, and the positioning of the players is incredibly important, so the aerial view is very important. The head coach is wearing a headset the whole game. And the people that are up there are talking to them the whole game. And I have long wondered when it would hit football that you would hire an analyst who sits up there and you put in like, you know, a Secret Service earpiece or something. It's a little more boutique, a little more chic than just the big, clunky headsets that American coaches wear all the time. And you listen to whatever that analyst has to tell you about what they're seeing. You know, if you thought you saw something a certain way, you can bounce it off them. And they are beaming it down to those tablets they've got on the touchline, obviously. That's been a part of management for a while, but that kind of constant communication could be really healthy. And Luis Enrique is just taking it one step further. And like I was saying, I think he's figured it out. You should want your manager to do this. Because in the first half, having that manager up there, I mean, you do lose out on some stuff. You can't work the officials. You can't work the fourth official. You can't get a real read for the ground level intensity and speed of the game. But the tactical insights you can glean from an aerial view are just different gravy. I mean, if you've ever actually been pitch side at a tactically complex match, it's just harder to see shit. The spacing between players and everything else, just because angles and science. So Luis Enrique, my hat's off to you. A coach that I have long thought was a really good coach who continues to impress me. Just please don't. I'm so glad he said he got it from rugby, because if he said he got this, it's like, well, I was watching the NFL, it would have been over. We would have been cooked. Cooked.